New York City is filled with ghosts, ghouls, and mysteries at every corner. It's one of the most fascinating cities to visit during Halloween. There's so many haunted history all around, and real history that's actually been documented by major publications like the New York Times. Today we're going to wander around Greenwich Village, which I love to wander around for Halloween, specifically because the Halloween parade is here and it's restarted this year once again. You'll be seeing that later tonight, stay tuned. But also because there's a big concentration of Halloween haunted history tales all around this neighborhood. It's my favorite place to talk about haunted history. So join me as we walk around Greenwich Village for some true haunted history. But today I am dressed as a particular era of New York City history, and it's actually very fitting for this neighborhood. I have a book that actually is a reference to that era. This is a book of poetry, and I am dressed up as a beatnik poet. The beatniks were people who came over here to Greenwich Village and other similar neighborhoods in the late 20s, throughout the 30s, all the way until about the early 50s. And they became poets, artists, singer-songwriters, and a whole slew of other different types of interesting things. So the beatniks, one of the more famous ones was Allen Ginsberg. Though I'm not dressed up as Allen Ginsberg, who wrote Howl right over here. I'm dressed up as just a general beatnik back then. They were known for their turtlenecks, and they also were known for their blazers. So I'm excited to walk around. But I am actually starting at a place as a to seek redemption from yesterday. Yesterday we tried a donut at Krispy Kreme, which was more horrifying than some of the stories I'm going to tell you today. And I want to make up for it. So let's eat a proper Halloween donut to start off the festivities here at Halloween Greenwich Village. So I am at the Donut Pub, and look at these spooky donuts. And I got myself a proper donut. I got myself a cold brew, not very beatnik-like, but I didn't quite have time to sit down at a proper cafe, whip out a cigarette, and start writing poetry to start this video. Didn't have quite to have the time for that, so I ended up getting myself a cold brew, and I ended up getting a donut with what looks like to be like a pumpkin. I can't quite tell. There was a ghost there. My bag flew away. Too much wind. Look at that. Let's try this out. A proper Halloween donut. Let's see how this is. So this is the vegan one. I tried the regular one before on similar videos, so refer back to those videos. They're both equally good, but this vegan one is delicious. Absolutely delicious. I can't tell the difference. It's just a bit grainier. You know, vegan treats have that kind of little bit grainier texture to them, so it has a great difference. Don't mind me, I'm filming a video. Okay, has that grainy texture to it, so it's really good. Highly recommend it. It's one of the best donuts in all of New York City.
I thought they had it like walked off.
Wow. And the topping is actually real chocolate, unlike yesterday's horrifying, terrifying, mystifying donut at Krispy Kreme. This one actually has some real chocolate on it, some real flavoring, and I love the icing. Icing is actually really good. So that is a good vegan donut. Let's finish this up. the beatniks probably ate some donuts, because donuts have been part of New York City history since Dutch times. So you could just imagine Allen Ginsberg with Burroughs and Kerouac eating some donuts late night as they're smoking cigarettes and talking poetry. Delicious. Let's continue walking around. And the cold brew is good, has a classic taste to it. Let's walk around, shall we? Miss Lobb says, smoking in the supernatural darkness of cold waterfalls, floating across the tops of cities, contemplating jazz. Thank you for quoting some Allen Ginsberg. Now, I wish it were a little bit easier to film inside, but inside it looks like a proper diner. I'll just peek in over here. You can see it. Looks like a proper diner, and it's called the Donut Pub. Some Halloween donuts, highly recommend it. They also have donuts all throughout the holidays. But let's go and explore the haunted history of New York City. These tales that I'm about to tell you are kid-friendly, so that's good. I'll warn if I mention anything not kid-friendly. But beyond that, I've mentioned them before, but since learning these stories and telling them in previous videos, I've learned new things. And I can't wait to tell you more. What are you wearing in your lower half? Breeches, says Susie. Beatniks did not wear breeches. They might have worn like loose-fitting pants. I'm wearing black jeans and some Converses. Now, Beatniks did wear Converses. This one's a little bit more of a modern Converse, but they did wear Converses. Check out the photos of any Beatniks. Now, there is a beatnik costume that you can find in certain stores, and they involve more like flip-flops and like a scraggly beard. Not quite my style. I was an educated, sophisticated beatnik. Graduated from Columbia University with the highest honors. Have you seen any trick-or-treaters yet? That's the turtleneck you should have worn in Ireland, says Susie. Susie, I'm glad you're tuning in. I bought this turtleneck because of your recommendation, insistent recommendation. And as I visited a beautiful store in Ireland called Carl Gross, which was located in Dublin, I bumped into this turtleneck and immediately fell in love. I don't like turtlenecks usually, but I immediately fell in love. And I also got this same jacket at the same store, Carl Gross in Dublin. Susie says, because of my hounding and nagging. And I am grateful for Susie. So everyone give a huge round of hearts for Susie. I really do enjoy this style. I decided to wear it for the first time today because I didn't feel like wearing like a stereotypical costume. I wanted to wear more of a period piece. It's something I'll continue to wear throughout winter. So round of hearts, Susie. Thank you so much for convincing me to get a turtleneck. Now, one more thing. I also may look like a stereotypical therapist. Yeah, that's not my intention. My intention is a beatnik. But if you look at any New York-based movies where there's a therapist, usually they're dressed this way as well. Hey, Wuffy, thank you so much for a $5 super chat. What did Wuffy say? What was the message that Wuffy put in? Wuffy, Autumn Wuffy, tell a ghost story during the stream. I will. Thank you so much for a $5 super chat sponsoring the donut. I will be telling you ghost stories. A few of them, actually. First, we gotta go to one of the most Gothic Gothic churches here in Greenwich Village. This is Grace Church, built in 1846 by James Renwick. His more famous, creepier building is the Smallpox Hospital, but he was one of the more famous Gothic architects in New York City history. Autumn, thank you so much again for the super chat. Appreciate you. Thank you. Now, this church might have been the site of a very somber wake many, many years ago. It's an Episcopal church, and its style was imitated in this building that was constructed in 1929. Now, it looks a bit different now because they changed up the style. I'll tell you why. But originally, when it was built in 1929, it was the Brittany Hotel. And this was supposed to be the grandest hotel in Greenwich Village. All the way in the very top was a penthouse. At that penthouse, in the very beginning of the hotel's construction, was used as a speakeasy, so people can drink illegally. Kenan from Azerbaijan, welcome. Nice to see you here, Kenan. Beautiful Sky says, okay, yeah, today's a beautiful day. Great day for Halloween, and windy. "15 stories high, 1929, the top used as a speakeasy." Over here, usually there's art. And this art, you'll come to know, is made by NYU students. Because the Brittany Hotel went into terrible disrepair by the 1960s-ish, 1970s. A few major artists stayed here, including Al Pacino, Jerry Garcia of the Grateful Dead. Not because he was a dead person that's grateful. No, the band, the Grateful Dead. And Adam Sandler as well, all stayed here at some point in this hotel. But then it fell into disrepair. And NYU, after they started coming back up by the 1980s, they started buying up a bunch of property all around this neighborhood. And they turned this into a dorm. Now, as this has been a dorm, students have heard weird noises late at night. A little girl laughing in the distance. Other accounts say that they see doors open out of nowhere in this dorm. A lot of students are freaked out. And if you go online and do some digging, you'll find many different accounts. Even the RAs, which are the people who manage the dorm, they admit to these creepy sightings, even though they keep pretty hush-hush about it. But if you get into a conversation with them long enough, they'll tell you. They even know the name. But I found 4 different accounts in this dorm. Let me show it to you. Four stories that I was able to find online. Direct accounts from 4 different students staying here. One of them was Arinetta, who one night woke up to see a figure right above her chest. She was terrified. She had no idea what it was, who it was, and she looks at the corner of her eye and sees that her roommate is still fast asleep. The door is locked. No one came in. She tries to sleep it away, and then as she opens up her eyes and looks up at the figure, she sees the woman's or the young girl's face covered with blonde locks. She is terrified. She moves away, and then she ends up looking that the figure goes off to the corner of the closet. She tries to sleep that night, but she can't. She sees, hey, how's it going? She sees the ghost at the corner, hidden in the closet the entire night. Another instance was Amelie. While she was hanging out with friends, suddenly the doors flung open. No one was there to be seen. No one was there to swing the doors open. All of her friends were inside the dorm with her. And then they fling open again and again, trying to demand the attention of Amelie and her friends. And Amelie just blurts out, "Molly, we don't want to play right now." And the door slams shut, leaving her and her friends to enjoy a quiet evening. But who is Molly? Well, then we have the story of Deanna. Deanna is taking a shower in her dorm. These showers have ensuite bathrooms. And inside, there's fog on the mirror. And as she gets out of the shower, she sees a small handprint at the very base of the mirror. This handprint is not the same handprint as her roommate's. This handprint was the handprint of a very little girl, maybe 5 years old. And then we have the final experience I was able to find, among a few others that you can also find, Claire. Claire was riding the elevator, the 5th floor. She was actually studying at the very penthouse. The penthouse went from a speakeasy to a penthouse hotel room to a study room where the NYU students can enjoy great views. There's actually a really haunting video on September 11th of someone filming the crash of the Twin Towers from up there. But nonetheless, Claire goes down, and as she's taking the elevator down to the 2nd floor where her dorm is located, the elevator shakes and stops at the 5th floor. It opens, and this is already late at night. She was cramming for a final and looks out and sees no one, not a soul. And the door closes and goes back to the 2nd floor. But who is this little girl that haunts these NYU students all throughout the night? What do you think happened to her? I know some people already know this story. If you don't know the story, what do you think happened to her? Now, I'll tell you one experience I had, and here's the Brittany Hall. I'll show it to you a little bit more up close. And here are all the NYU buildings. They own most of the neighborhood. And we're right here in NYU's dorm. There's a few other dorms. Actually, a few others that are actually haunted as well. So Alexander says, you're a very good storyteller. Thank you so much, Alexander. I appreciate that. Someone says she fell out of a window, says Elizabeth. Elizabeth has an excellent guess. So I'll tell you my experience that I had. I actually dated someone who was a student over here and was in. This was in my early 20s. And as I spent the night, of course, we were studying. Yeah, we were. It was purely academically. We were staying the night, and I woke up in the middle of the night, and I saw this ghostly figure with a pale white face, and it looked scraggly, and I was terrified. And I remember earlier that night hanging out with the woman I was seeing at that time, she was telling me that her roommate wasn't going to make it till very late at night, and that she is a little bit of a shopaholic. And I remember seeing a bunch of like shopping bags all around the dorm room. And I was terrified when I woke up and saw that ghostly figure with like a melted face. And as I panicked and turned out the lights, I ended up realizing it wasn't Molly the ghost. It was actually her roommates that had one of those face masks to like exfoliate the face. So no, I did not see Molly, but it was close. It was close. But what ended up happening was in 1929, as this was being constructed, a man couldn't leave his daughter with a daycare or his wife. I'm not sure exactly what was the instance, but he brought her over to work. He brought his own 5-year-old daughter to work, Molly. Molly was playing at the very top floor with her toys, and one of the toys rolls down the elevator, and Molly goes chasing the toy, and she doesn't realize that there is no elevator. It's just the elevator shaft. And as she's going down, she falls. The father goes and investigates, sees the toys scattered, but doesn't see his daughter, and he tries to find her. He has no idea where she went, and he already fears the worst, looks down, and knows intuitively that she fell down the shaft. The weird thing is, all the construction workers suddenly scrambled around to go down to the elevator shaft to recover the body of his dear Molly. Maybe in the off chance she would have survived. But she didn't. They couldn't find her. No body was to be seen. No blood. Nothing. Just the toy. They didn't know what happened. They just assumed that she was dead, but they had a funeral with no body. A paranormal investigator came over here and did an investigation because of all these hauntings. I told you 4 of them, direct accounts from NYU students, all written online. You can search for them. And they end up doing an investigation and end up finding out that the building itself had very high amounts of residual energy. Nervous residual energy was the official term. What does that mean? Well, it means that the NYU students might be so nervous throughout midterms and finals that it causes these hauntings to manifest. So, is it really Molly, the 5-year-old ghost that haunts NYU students to this day? Is it the shopaholic roommate of the girl I was seeing in my early 20s? Or is it residual nervous energy from anxious NYU students during midterms and finals? Let me know what you think. Let's continue walking. So why did the style change? I was going to mention that it looked a little bit more gothic before, but since NYU did repairs, they changed all the windows, and they also took some of the details on the facade, so it looks a little bit less gothic now. All right, let's continue walking around. Hey, NW says, I'm freaking you out now. Gary says she might have been kidnapped. I'm not sure what happened. No one knows. They never recovered the body, and there was no signs of injury. Susie says, which subject are you teaching in Princeton? Since I'm dressed as a New York City beatnik, it would be at Columbia University. And of course, I am teaching both poetry and also quantum mechanics. Eibel says, voting for residual nervous energy. Oh, look at this. What is this? Village Voices. It's made by the Village Preservation Society. It says, scan me. Treat yourself soon to an apple caramel macchiato. Shout out from the last stop on the G train in Brooklyn, Sophia. You know, I've never been on the last stop on the G train. Sophia, thank you so much for a $5 super chat. So this is a Jason Pollock, and I assume maybe he spent some time here. Susan says, did you say last year you would never return to the merchant's house? I don't think so. I don't think I said that. There's only in Greenwich Village, but you can do your own research. It's called the House of Death, where Mark Twain stayed. It's too grisly, too weird of a haunted tour way before I started Urbanist, and had the worst feeling in my stomach being there. And I was there with a very close friend, and he weird place. So that's a place I would never cover, but you can do your own research for that one. So Sophia, thank you so much for the $5 super chat. Appreciate you. Reverend, the merchant's house had. That's awesome. I'm glad they did. Romal says, my favorite haunted... Mark says it's a ghostly reflection of the... That's weird. Yeah, it's laggy for some reason. For any of the Facebookers, can you let people know in the Urbanist of the World group page that I am live on YT on YouTube?
Yeah, I mean...
Susie says, oh no, I'll have trouble sleeping at night. I'm just about to go out on my broomstick, says Susie. That's awesome, Susie. Adam, thank you so much for tuning in. Panajote says, the ghosts don't want Ariel to reveal their secrets. Kay already did that. Oh, awesome. Thank you so much, Kay. LC, did I get a new gimbal or did I find the part? I did find the parts, so I didn't need to buy an entirely new gimbal, which is nice. So as we're walking through Greenwich Village, there's a whole lot of haunted, not beyond haunted history, there's a lot of occult history. I am not covering that today, but maybe someday in the near future. But if you're interested, a lot of unique characters lived here. Among them was Aleister Crowley. He lived in one of these buildings around here. And he's known as one of the most wicked men of history. He was a cult leader in the I think he was a cult leader around the 1890s? No, a little bit later, 1920s, around there, 1920s-ish. And then there is Neville Goddard, who's kind of the opposite of Aleister Crowley. And he inspired a lot of positive thinking speakers of the modern day. And people who like wrote The Secret and things like that. So really interesting figures lived here. More scary stories. Oh yeah. Now there was a writer, I forgot whom, but he said that this looked like the ziggurat. He always thought that this had some type of occult meaning to it, this particular building, because it looked like a huge ziggurat. Ihan, I'm using an iPhone 11 Pro Max. Hey Susan, nice to see you here. If Ronald says, if a kid approached you and told me, I see hipsters, would I be scared? Yeah, I would be terrified. A kid lives in Williamsburg. It'd be terrifying. What's a ziggurat? Ziggurat is a pyramid from the Middle East area. Ancient Sumeria. It's a stepped pyramid. What is the name of the haunted dorm? It's called Brittany Residence. Brittany. Susie says NYU tuition. Now that's scary. That is terrifying. NYU tuition. Oh yeah. Eyeball says, thank you, learned something new. And the leaves are turning. Perfect for Halloween. So of course I mentioned this many times. This is the street that's featured in I Am Legend. Will Smith lives on that corner down there. And along here, of course, we have all these cars parked. Excuse me. We have all these cars parked. And he retrofits them with explosives. And then there's an awesome scene in that film. Check it out. Milos. So now we're surrounded by more NYU buildings. Gorgeous when you look up at them. Gorgeous, gorgeous buildings. Susie says, I love that movie. That's a great movie, a great scary movie to see that is based in New York. It's more action-packed. Kay says clocks went down here an hour ago, and now it's dark in Ireland. Oh no. Our man asks, does my gimbal come with a hot shoe for the mic? No, I use Velcro. Our man in Volterra says, loving this by the way. I'm so glad you are. Wish we had summertime all year round, says Pandajotas. Me too. Summertime would be amazing. So right here, we're in Washington Square Park. This is Lower Manhattan, and then within this area we have Washington Square Park. Washington Square Park was part, right during the time between the Dutch and the British, was Little Africa. And let me mute a little bit. All right, we're back. Susie says perfect music. Yeah, someone was playing popular techno music. Susie says don't stop the music. Is that from Stranger Things? No, it's original. It might sound like Stranger Things because it is inspired by Stranger Things, but it is indeed original. There's a great book about haunted history called Haunted Stories of Greenwich Village that talks about one specific account, and there's been many others, of a guy walking through here late at night. And as he looks above in the cold, wintry night, he sees a figure standing right there on top of the Washington Square Park arc. Sue says it's very quiet. Indeed it is. Lots of skateboarders behind me. So he saw a mysterious figure all the way at the very top, and he was confused as to if someone was up there. He's heard rumors of there being a stairway all the way to the very top, and that stairway is right here. People throughout the years have reported seeing the same individual. Sometimes they would see a group. And after a few minutes, those people would just disappear. Did they descend back into the staircase? Most likely not, because this staircase has been out of access, closed for decades. Only New York City government or the police can get through here, or the Parks Department, that is. (1916), New Year's Eve, a group of artists, among them Marcel Duchamp, they considered themselves bohemians. So bohemians predate the beatniks. They moved here around the teens all the way to the 20s. These bohemians fancied themselves as real progressives in American society. But they thought Greenwich Village, since it was such a hip, cool place to be, filled with a bohemian culture, thriving arts, it should become its own independent nation. So Marcel Duchamp and a few of his friends went all the way to the very top of the arch, set up Chinese lanterns, had teacups filled with a lot of alcohol, and they sipped the night away. And then during the middle of the night, as the clock was about to strike midnight into the new year of 1917, them looking all the way down impeccable views of Fifth Avenue, he declared Greenwich Village as an independent, free state. However, the police in the morning caught wind of the situation, and also they saw a gigantic bonfire up there and arrested them. Lo and behold, Greenwich Village has never become a free, independent state. It's still part of New York City, which is still part of the United States of America. But to this day, people still swear that they see the spirit of Marcel Duchamp up there, lingering above, maybe still hoping that Greenwich Village will once become free again. Let's zoom out more of the details. Hey, nomás dice que es lindo verte después de unos meses que estuvimos viajando. Oh, qué bien. Qué bien que estaba viajando por las Pampas. Qué bien por verte otra vez, Novadas. Nice to see you again. Thank you so much for tuning in. Matrix says it's an Arc de Triomphe copy. It is indeed, yes. But Arc de Triomphe is a copy of many of the memorial arches from ancient Rome. So even the Arc de Triomphe is not original. So, usually I would tell you this story walking through this pathway over here. But unfortunately, that pathway has now some of the weirdest characters that I've ever seen in New York City in a very unpleasant way. Because Washington Square Park is usually filled with very interesting, odd characters. But most of the time, they are very pleasant. They're very kind of, quirky people to see out and about, dressed in very interesting ways. But unfortunately now it's filled with rather unpleasant people in that area. And I wonder if it's a coincidence, because back in 2009, just a few short Con Edison, the electrical company, was doing work over here, and they were digging through the park in order to fix the electrical infrastructure and maintain it. And they came across something hard. They couldn't dig further. It was a tombstone. They dug it up. The tombstone read 1799, Jack Johnson from Kildare, Ireland. He passed away. Here's the tombstone. James Jackson.
But I was never strict with anything I asked him to do.
There's a guy with a paper bag behind me. Yeah, there's going to be very weird characters here today because of Halloween. People are dressed in interesting ways. And then they kept on digging and found more bones, more remains. And then they kept on digging and even more remains. And then they kept on digging and even found even more. This is all based on real stories. But what happened here? Well, for that we have to go back to Dutch times. Actually, for that, let's go back even further. Native American times, Lenapes. The Lenape called this the tobacco fields. Here they grew some tobacco. But it was also known as a sacred place where they would bury their dead. Then, because this was already a graveyard, the Dutch had a very interesting plan. They were colonizing an area that was already owned by the Lenape Native Americans. They've been here for centuries before them. but they took lands of Manhattan forcefully. So they end up bringing people from Angola in bondage over the Atlantic Ocean to settle the neighborhoods between the Dutch settlement of New Amsterdam, which was modern-day financial district, and the Lenapes area, which was right above 14th Street-ish. And they send these Angolans to settle right here. They were considered half slaves because, yes, they were brought in bondage, but they could technically live here for free. It was a bit weird. Their purpose was to be a buffer between the hostile Native Americans and the new settlers of Dutch New Amsterdam. And if these hostile Native Americans would attack, they would attack first the Angolans. So this entire area, 130 acres, became known as Little Africa. And they were given these lands, particularly because they were really of low worth. They were swampy, muddy. There was a huge stream over here called Minetta, and it wasn't the best land to grow on, and also it was already used as a graveyard. So these Africans did thrive for quite a while, the Angolans, and then they started building their own neighborhoods, and they actually started making quite a good living on their own. Their community was growing. But of course, since the Dutch weren't forcing any culture on them, they continued their cultural traditions. So they would continue to bury their dead over here. The thing is with these Angolans is that the way they would bury their dead was to sing very loud, boisterous songs all throughout the night. Of course, there's traditions all around the world they do this, but it's very different from the Dutch, very different from later the English. They don't really do that. But they would huge bonfires and sing the entire night. The Dutch were terrified of this, but they continued to let it go because they thought to themselves, okay, they'll keep to themselves. But then the British took over and established New York. And the British were even more terrified of these songs that would go throughout the night. Because the British were suspect that these were not songs of a funeral, these were songs of an upcoming rebellion, a slave rebellion. The reason they thought this was because slave rebellions were already starting to happen all around the colonies of the French, of the British, and of other nations, like the Spaniards as well. And in some of these instances, the African slaves that would rebel would sing songs all throughout the night. There would be different songs, of course, but they would sing nonetheless. So the British colonialists thought that they were planning a massive rebellion. And also they were sick and tired of the noise. So they end up kicking out all these Africans from their own land that they settled here. By that time, about 70, 80 years they've been living here, and decided to make this into a potter's field. Because at that time, in 1797, New York was being ravaged by a massive epidemic of cholera. They had to bury a lot of their dead. This was known as a potter's field. So think about this. This has happened a lot in New York City history. Thriving African villages have been evicted to be replaced with a graveyard, and then later in Central Park to be replaced with a park. It's happened over and over and over again. But here, Potter's Field meant that people who couldn't afford a burial, their families couldn't afford a burial, or they couldn't be identified, had to be buried here. So among those would be some of those African slaves. Among those would be people too poor who couldn't afford their own burials, white or any other color. And some of those might be people who couldn't be identified because they had no idea who they were. They would all be buried here. But then by the 1820s, New York City was ravaged by a massive epidemic that was even bigger than cholera. It was yellow fever. Yellow fever ended up claiming thousands of lives in America. Quarantines were set up in Staten Island, where ships, any ship that would come, would have to wait about 14 days in Staten Island. And there we go. Real pizza, real New Yorker right there. So, all these men and women, children, and people who just plainly couldn't be identified were buried right here. It is estimated that right beneath our feet right now, underneath this bench, all around this park, mostly in this area, 20,000 dead bodies are located. At night, people report seeing a ominous green mist surround the air. And no, that mist isn't people smoking oregano. That mist apparently is the dead that still lingers here to this day. So I'm laughing because of the little kid passing by. But yeah, that's what's happened here. Now, they're mostly buried on this side of the park, where if you're already seeing on the corner of my screen, not here particularly right now, but a little bit before, there's weird characters. For some reason, this side of the park attracts more weird characters than the other side. I've been on the other side. It's a lot more pleasant to sit on the other side. More students, more people skateboarding, having fun, kids maybe smoking oregano. But here, it's a bit weirder, especially at night. But there's one particular woman who still haunts this very park. 20,000 buried here, mostly due to epidemic, but there was one executed right here in these very grounds, in the oldest tree in all of Manhattan. You guys want to check it out? Let me know. So I'm going to avoid going through the weird area, and I'm going to go around. And we'll see the tree, but I'm going to go the long way around. Because unfortunately, walking around with the camera in that corner of the park draws way too much attention. Way too much. So you see this tree sticking out right there? Right here. That tree is more than 130 feet tall, more than 330 years old. AR says my mom haunts this park. Oh no, your mom haunts this park. So on this corner of the park, unfortunately, there's a lot of drug dealers, and they don't like anyone filming, even if I'm not filming them particularly. So that's another reason why I'm not going to that corner today. So let's go the long way around. So 330 years ago, this tree was built. Actually, before I get there, American Revolution. General Lafayette was walking through this area. And as he was walking through this area, he was shocked to see men being hung on a particular tree. These men were deserters or men who were enemies of the American Revolution. Let me show you.
Run errands, go to.
So for a while, this was used also as a military parade ground. It became a right in the distance. Lafayette, of course. Lafayette from the show Hamilton. He was a French general that fought on behalf of the Americans. And when he came over here, he saw men being hung from this very tree. This is the oldest tree of all of Manhattan. It's older than even the country of the United States of America. It's been here since Dutch colonial times. It's known as the Hangman's Elm. And Ania, yes, you're right. So everyone, I appreciate your fervor for other streamers out there. But like you would not go into a party and scream, "Hey, my friend is having a party nearby." You wouldn't do that at a party. Don't do that here. You will be timed out. Thank you. So yeah, this is the Hangman's Elm. Oldest tree in all Manhattan.
Watch this one.
Weird characters, as I told you. 1819. These houses around here were for some of the more richer residents of New York City. There was an enslaved woman by the name of Rose Butler. She was taken from Mount Pleasant, New York, where she was born, and brought down over here. Under bondage, of course. Unfortunately, as well. For perspective, New York City would have emancipation, so they would free all the slaves here. And Rose was 8 years old. She's working in one of these houses. This fire ravages the kitchen, but the family end up escaping all in safety. But suddenly the pitchforks come out. They come out and they blame Rose Butler. They say, "You are the reason for this great fire that could have killed the entire family." Rose Butler suddenly was suspect number one. At that time, this was a very arson. Because but wait a minute. Bad service here, so let me go here to the corner. Hey, Miss Fancy, nice to see you here. Let me know. Thank you for moving. Yeah, I think there's bad service here. Let me go over here. Let me know if it's a lot better now. I wonder if she's related to the Kilkenny Butlers. No, she's not. So let me know what you heard. Now there's a guy with a megaphone. This area of Washington Square Park is getting too weird. People are possessed today. Yeah, a lot of people are taking hard drugs. They might be those type of drugs that really kind of mess people up. Okay, let me know what you heard. Yeah, so, way too many odd people. Luckily now there's police patrols, which is nice. The spirits are messing about, says Autumn. Yeah. Start over from the start of the stream, says Warhol. All right, I'll tell you. So Rose Butler was accused of arson because a nearby mansion burned down. The family was safe, only the kitchen was severely burned. And now we're experiencing another haunting. This is another scary part of New York City, parallel parking. How can you parallel park in such a small little lot and try to not crash into both of the vehicles where every there in the corner? Luckily, that person dodged the haunting. Rose Butler, accused of arson, was a capital offense. There was only 2 capital offenses at that time, murder and arson. But wait a minute, why is arson considered such a serious offense on the federal level? Well, the reason for that is at that time, most cities were very susceptible to being damaged by fire. Entire cities could have been destroyed because of one fire. So unfortunately, Rose was charged with something that could condemn her and lead her to being executed. This was taken all the way up to the Supreme Court. Rose continued to plead her innocence until she was interrogated for hours on hours on hours on hours until she confessed. Weirdly enough, there were reports of 4 men who came during her confession. And she said that she burned down the house, that she tied a little string to try to trap the family, and that she was solely responsible for this entire fire. Petter, thank you so much for a super chat. Petter, thank you so much. I appreciate you for the super chat. So, was she responsible? This confession most likely was forced. Who were these 4 men? No one really knows. Was she in cahoots with them? Maybe. Maybe not. No one knows. Point is, no one died from the fire. The fire did not spread. Only the kitchen burned down. Was it really that serious of an offense? Well, she was charged for arson on the federal level, Supreme Court, and she was going to be executed here on July 9th, 1819. Rose Butler was 19 years old, surrounded by more than 10,000 spectators in this park. And she was executed, hung from the Hangman's Elm. Now, historically, no one knows for sure if she was hung exactly on this elm. That's the legend. But she was definitely hung within this 500-meter radius. Somewhere around this area, she was hung. But the legend says that it was here at the Hangman's Elm. To this day, people still see, late at night, a body hanging back and forth. And no, it's not a drunken NYU student who decided to climb the tree, high on Molly. Or no, it's not one of the more odder characters here in the corner of the park, high on PCP. But people think it's still the ghost of Rose Butler that still haunts our park to this day. So be careful late at night, especially on this side at the Hangman's Elm. As Phil says, okay, I didn't know about that. Thanks for the epic storytelling with a little dash of comedy, says Dutch Moss. Thank you so much. I appreciate that, Dutch. Thank you so much for tuning in. Let's continue to our next stop. Feel free to ask me any questions. Maybe it's Rosa who leads a spectral army of wrongfully killed slaves in the park. That actually would be a very epic story, I think. Yeah. If it's treated with sensitivity, of course.
Oh,
You need to be are you leaving?
So here we have the barricades because they're already starting to set up for the Halloween parade. Chun is having goosebumps. Ooh, Chun. That's awesome. S. Field says, you look very elegant. Oh, thank you so much, S. Fields. I'm dressed up as a beatnik. A beatnik poet. A beatnik poet professor from Columbia University who hangs out with Allen Ginsberg and Kerouac. Let me know famous beatnik women, if anyone can name a few. So I will be walking along this parade later tonight. Stay tuned. Hopefully I'll have some cell reception where I can stream from. So let me cross the street. Now there's a crazy amount of haunted history here. I'm just picking and choosing the ones I've found more intrigued by. This is really cool because at the Halloween parade they decorated with like spiders and things like that. And this used to be a women's jail where the murderer or the attacker, attempted murderer of Andy Warhol was thrown in jail over here. AR, wow. Thank you so much for the very kind $30 super chat. That is super kind of you. Thank you so much. Let me get out of here before I'm locked in forever. No worries. So I'll be locked in right here. Thank you for this lovely haunting tour, says Alma. Can't wait for the parade later tonight. Valerie Solanas, thank you so much. Valerie Solanas, yes. She was the one who shot Warhol, was imprisoned down there. Thank you for the wonderful storytelling, says Sil. I have 3 more stories to tell you. And a mini story I can tell you. Ooh, spice cider latte. Oh, that sounds good. This is Joe Coffee, one of my favorite places. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is Gay Street. Now, Gay Street is located in Greenwich Village. And of course, Greenwich Village historically has been known for about 100 years as the LGBT epicenter of the US. However, the name Gay Street actually predates the LGBT neighborhood because this name dates all the way back to the early 1800s. No one really knows why it's called Gay Street. The more common legend is named after a writer called Sidney Howard Gay, but even him, he lived here after the street was already named. Now this street was also part of Little Africa. And then later in the 1800s, African Americans lived here and many artists lived here. Many jazz artists before they went up to Harlem lived here. And it was a very lovely street filled with music. But this is 12 Gay Street. This is the most haunted house on this street. Let's go back to 1956. A man by the name of Frank Paris moves in here with his lover, with his partner, Ted. They often had parties here, hanging out with their friends and family, and they were typical bohemians or typical beatniks at that time. And they came over here, and one night they were hosting a party. The party guests were anxious for Frank to let them down into the basement. Because Frank was actually the former marionetter of Howdy Doody. He was the one who invented the most famous American puppet, Howdy Doody. And he also was one of the most famous puppeteers in American history. Let me show photos of him right now. So you know how he looks like. Here he is. And here he is with his puppets. And do I have a photo of Howdy Doody? Let's see. No. All right. Okay, so Frank Paris. His friends and family are eager for a sneak peek down into the basement. Finally, after many drinks and Ted, his partner, kind of egging him on, Frank says, okay, everyone, stand up. We're going downstairs. The party guests are eager. They're like, yes, we're going to go downstairs. Because downstairs, he has the Howdy Doody puppet, the original one. Now, Howdy Doody, for that generation of the 50s, is as famous as, say, Goku or Spider-Man is for my generation. So everyone's super excited. They're like, all right, we're going to go down. They go down to the basement. As they're walking down, Frank and Ted are leading them down drunkenly, having a good merry time. And suddenly they hear footsteps. And they look up, all the party guests. Frank and Ted look at each other, right into their eyes. They know what this is. They've heard this before. Party guests are terrified. They have no idea what's happening. And they ask Frank and Ted, does anyone live up there? And they respond, not a soul. Another moment. Alice Mary Hall, one of the friends of Frank and Ted's, comes visiting. And they're having a good, merry, gay old time. Also a lot of drinks in them. And Frank goes to fetch more drinks so him and Alice can enjoy in the first floor. As Frank goes into the kitchen, Alice is stunned because she sees a man in a dark cape with a wide brim hat, piercing green eyes, looking at her directly. Frank comes in whistling about and he disappears, nowhere to be seen. And thank you so much, AR, for the additional $10. Thank you so much. I appreciate you, AR. Thank you so much. Everyone, round of hearts for AR for giving $40 so far. Nowhere to be seen. She tells Frank, hey, who was that man? Is there someone else in your home? And Frank is, no. No one else is here aside from Ted. He's in the back. And he's certainly not wearing a cape and a wide brim hat. He doesn't believe Alice. I don't think he wants to believe Alice. A few weeks later, Frank is alone at the first floor, also drinking a nice cocktail, probably doing some reading. His dog is right beside him, and suddenly a man appears with a long cape, a wide brim hat, and piercing green eyes, and looks directly at him. The dog starts barking. That's how Frank knows that's not only him seeing this random weird character from some drunken stupor. His dog also sees him. He smells a very strong scent of fried onions. The dog goes towards the man in the cape and he disappears in a puff of smoke. Now Frank is terrified at this point, along with Ted, and they hire one of the top ghost hunters of that time. This ghost hunter is a guy who coined the term ghost hunter. There's even a show where his daughter is a star of it. It's called the Holzer Files. This man is called Hans Holzer. This is where I learned a lot of these stories. He's a really cool guy. He wrote a lot of books. One of the books I ended up getting was called Yankee Ghosts. Oh, American Hauntings was the one that this story is featured in. So he calls Hans Holzer, the premier paranormal investigator, to see what is happening. He comes up with his medium, who goes by the name of Betty Ritter. Betty Ritter goes and conducts a seance in this house. As she is conducting the seance, she starts seeing visions of characters. She sees a vision of a man called Ming smoking in the opium den. He's having a big argument with a woman. She sees a vision of a French diplomat being tortured to death. And she also sees visions of parties happening here and crime syndicates organizing, having meetings. It's a bit weird. Let me show you some of the pictures she would have seen. So this is Hans Holzer, and he wrote a book called The Yankee Ghosts and a few other books called American Hauntings, where this story is featured. Remember this guy, because he'll be very important. I didn't show Rose Butler before, but this is Rose Butler, just so I can show you what she looked like. And this is how Gay Street would have looked like back then, right here. Ah, here's Howdy Doody. There we go, I found him. Howdy Doody. That is the puppet in the basement, locked up in a chest. Kept secret, because he's very valuable. And the men she would have seen might have looked more like one of those Chinese American gangsters in Chinatown. Like these men right over here. And she saw a French diplomat, similar to this gentleman over here. So this all sounds kind of like stories from some type of pulp novels. They don't sound like they were real. I mean, yeah, sure, there was wars between crime syndicates in Chinatown, but this wasn't Chinatown. Yeah, there was opium dens, but maybe 2 or 3. Probably not here. What was up with these stories? They felt rather odd. Well, the story gets a little bit more complicated because we have to go further into time. A man by the name of Walter B. Gibson contacts one of the newspapers. After hearing all these stories, after hearing the investigations of Hans Holzer, and he says, maybe I am responsible. This is Walter B. Gibson, and this was the story that came out. What strange spirit lurks at 12 Gay Street? How does a fiction writer famous in his time claim responsibility of a phantom that appears late at night? Well, Walter B. Gibson lived over here as well. In 1949, he published the very last book. Someone's coming out from their basement apartment. He published the very last book of The Shadow, called Whispering Eyes. Walter B. Gibson was famous for that character, whose real name was Lamont Cranston. And he was basically this ancient being who lived a very rich life, kind of like a Bruce Wayne with immortality. He basically was the inspiration for Batman and many superheroes after him. He was basically the original pulp superhero. So The Shadow was written so much by Walter B. Gibson. He wrote 283 books in this building alone. In the span of only a few years, 6 or 5 years or so, wasn't that many. And according to him, he wrote it so vividly that the stories started coming up automatically on their own. He started seeing the shadow late at night as he was writing. Almost like the shadow became its own being as all these books just kept flowing out of him. He wrote 325 in total, 283 in this building alone. In the course of only a few years, he was basically writing a book every few days, every 4 or 5 days. He was writing one book. Well, he believed in the concept called the tulpa. Tulpa is an ancient Tibetan concept that if you think something hard enough, if you make a character so vivid in your mind throughout meditation that it could become a real thing, a real phantom. Walter B. Gibson says that is the phantom that Frank Paris, Ted, and his friends were seeing. But the story gets even more complicated, because we have to go back to the 1920s. Another man owned this apartment. His name was Mary Jimmy Walker. He was known for his sharp way of dressing. He loved wearing his big jackets. He loved wearing his capes, his wide brim hats. He also was known for having piercing green eyes. I don't have piercing green eyes, so yeah, I have jet black hair like the Shadow and like Mary Jimmy Walker, but no piercing green eyes. So I am not the Shadow. He was known for being quite a playboy. He actually ran a speakeasy over here called the Pirate's Den. And during the 1920s, it was actually illegal to consume alcohol in the United States of America. But he didn't care. He decided to drink alcohol and sell alcohol anyway. He encouraged his own police commissioner to not pursue any crimes of drinking alcohol. Pirate's Den was in the basement, and they would serve up cocktails and fried onions. Then he fell deeply in love with a woman by the name of Betty Compton. Betty Compton was known as a Ziegfeld Follies girl. Ziegfeld Follies was a huge theater production at the New Amsterdam Theater in modern-day Times Square. It's actually haunted by another woman called Olive Thomas. But Betty Compton was Mary Jimmy Walker's mistress. And he gave this apartment, 12 Gay Street, to her. He spent more time here at 12 Gay Street than his own mayoral mansion with his own wife. And it was all public. He didn't care. But Mary Jimmy Walker served from 1926 to 1932 until he was ousted by the very President of the United States of America, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, or he was about to become president. He was governor of New York State because he was corrupt. Not only did he drink on the job, not only did he hold public affairs, not only was he in cahoots with Tammany Hall, who was one of the most corrupt organizations in New York City history, he also embezzled and kept a lot of money. He had to be ousted so Franklin Delano Roosevelt can actually become president of the United States of America. And he fled over to Europe to avoid any charges with his dame, Betty Compton, and they got married over there. He ended up coming back to New York City, but as a disgraced former mayor, never to hold political office again. Thank you so much, Vita, for the $11.11. I appreciate that. 11.11. That's so cool. Thank you so much, Panajotis. Thank you for all the historical info and spooky stories. Hey, how's it going? Thank you for all the spooky stories. Says Panajotis. Hope the parade stream carries through. Yes, indeed. And let me show you a few photos of the people I'm talking about. Here's Mary Jimmy Walker. And this was his mistress and then later his wife, Betty Compton. And, wait a minute, Mary Jimmy Walker, and then Walter B. Gibson moved over here, and then he wrote a character that was suave, charming, wore a big cape, had immense power in New York City, and was a great dresser. Wait a minute. Is the shadow Mary Jimmy Walker? What do you think? This is the very last book. Because the only haunting, not the phantom at Frank Paris is not the only haunting that happens here. People still to this day, neighbors, see a man walking around, a phantom wearing a wide brim hat and a cape, whistling about late at night. They hear party goers partying till 2 a.m., 3 a.m., but this area is not a particular area where there's a lot of bars. There's a French restaurant in the corner, but it's already closed. People have reported the smell of fried onions, but fried onions, when those reports happened, there was no French restaurant at the corner. So, who is it? Well, in 1997, this house was trying to be sold for $4 million. Actually, it was not 1997, 2007. 2007, they were attempting to sell this house for $4 million. But the realtors couldn't find any buyers. They thought maybe it was because of all the haunted stories. So they interviewed a few of the neighbors, including a neighbor that lived right in front. And this neighbor said, no wonder that's not being sold. Moving into that house is like moving into The Shining. He was referring to a Stanley Kubrick film starring Jack Nicholson, where he goes into this beautiful mountaintop hotel in the middle of the wintertime, and he goes crazy. Basically saying that this house is filled with spirits. That's what you heard if you see my TikTok video. I just gave you the longer version. Do you think that's the shadow? Or do you think it's Mary Jimmy Walker? Or do you think it's a combination of both? Did the ghost of Mary Jimmy Walker inspire Walter B. Gibson to write this character that would become the shadow, and then that combination manifested into that phantom? What do you think? But there's one twist to this story. Do you guys want to know it? It's something that happened literally to me that I did not talk about in previous videos. I've been telling the story of this house for many years. Every time I pass by it, it's empty. And something weird happened about 2 weeks ago when I was hired to do a haunted history tour for a club of women who have autism here in New York City. A virtual tour. Joanne says it's howdy doody. I'll show you. So as I'm here, I have to be careful because this house is actually under surveillance by the FBI, probably by the CIA as well. CIA is technically not supposed to do surveillance within the United States, so technically it's just the FBI. Jimmy says only the shadow knows. Indeed, only the shadow knows. Zap says, oh my God, be careful. The windows, the blinds are shut. When I came here 2 weeks ago, a light went on in the basement, a blue light. I had no idea what that was. I was shocked when I saw that blue light. When I did this tour 2 weeks ago, just a few hours before, this same house, 12 Gay Street, was raided by the FBI. Just a few hours before I came over here and did that TikTok video as well. Can you share that virtual tour? No, it was on a Zoom call, so it doesn't exist. But I filmed that TikTok video that same day before I knew about this story. Rachel Maddow, at that very night, as I'm filming this TikTok video, completely unbeknownst to me, was talking about a raid that happened just a short few hours before then. The FBI came over here because one of the richest Russian oligarchs lived in this building. That Russian oligarch was being paid by another Russian businessman that lived right in front. That Russian businessman was actually the same guy that was interviewed by the New York Times, or by the New York Magazine, back in 2007 when they were trying to sell the house, and he referenced The Shining. This Russian oligarch came over here to the US a few years ago, and his job basically was to spread the Russian agenda in the United States of America. And why was he in investigation? Because one of the people he was paying directly was our former President of the United States of America. That contract ended shortly before he started running for president. I don't talk politics here, so let's not get into the politics of the situation, but that is the real investigation that's happening, and that was a real Russian oligarch that lived here until he was arrested. And the guy in front as well. So. Crazy stuff has happened in this house. That is the story. Only the shadow knows. And that blue light that came on that night when I was filming the TikTok video, I don't know what it was, but it might have been an FBI agent still searching the premises. And now the house is empty once again. Let's continue walking around. I smell fried onions. It's because there's a French restaurant here. It's not the Shadow. Or Mary Jimmy Walker. and Nia says, oh my God, this stream is now being shadowed. Hello, FBI. Yeah, everyone give a nice, warm round of hearts to the FBI who's tuning in right now. During why there's a gentleman standing in front of the house with the camera, telling a very long story. Here's Boucherie. Great French restaurant. I really love this restaurant. Highly recommend it, actually, for some nice French onion soup. Oh no, Ariel, you might have been arrested by the FBI. We'll come to rescue you. I'm probably being surveilled right now. They're like, what? This man is onto something. He knows about the Shadow. The sign hasn't been replaced at the corner? Yeah, it has been replaced. Yeah, no longer there's the huge sign with the LGBT plus. And Sally, who owns the house? Well, technically still the Russian oligarch. I mean, I think he's been arrested. I don't know the full story, but as far as I know, I think he's been arrested and probably still owns the house until he's convicted of something. And then the house might be sold or put up for sale. I'm not sure what happens in those instances, if anyone knows. Jake, that was Gay Street. Purchase the house, says Urbanist NYC headquarters. That would be rather terrifying. Ania says, but your story corroborates a lot of other events, and man, that's intense. Oh yeah. Okay, it's getting pretty dark. Clouds are rolling in, so let me switch to my glasses. I have 2 more stops left. Let me know if you want to enjoy 2 more stories here in New York City, a few blocks away. Those 2 stories are actually right next to each other. My Susie says it might be a good deal. Yeah. Well, if it's being foreclosed because of a conviction, I'm not sure if that happens. Let me know if anyone knows that the laws, if it happens. Susie says that this is a really nice turtleneck. Looks very professional / beatnik / professor look. Yeah, indeed it does. But the house is still empty. Now it is, because the guy was arrested and apparently has been seized by the FBI. More stories, says Cheryl, please. Christoph says, would be nice. Love to hear 2 more ghost stories. Susan says, more stories, please. Frank, hey, from Binghamton. Nice to see you here, Frank. Welcome. I gotta pick up my tickets too, so I can't stay too long. I gotta pick up my ticket to go inside the parade. You look like Matt Murdock, says Kat. You mean Daredevil? He doesn't wear turtlenecks. He wears more like shirt and tie. But thank you. That's a good compliment. Thank you so much.
You knew they had that flavor. Mac and cheese?
I thought they were sitting in their car.
By the way, the new mic works wonders, says Panajotis. Oh, I'm so glad. Oh my gosh, Shaggy there at the distance. Look. Oh, that's so cool. Scooby-Doo characters. Shaggy and Velma. You look Norwegian with that pullover, Gary. I look like Norwegian. Oh, that's so cool. Same story with aliens. Ania says, I look like Doctor Strange when he's off duty. Sorry, the guy got arrested. Ania says it can't be purchased if it's a federal case. Okay, thank you so much for clarifying. So it seems like it won't be going for sale anytime soon until that case is solved. I'm aging myself, but you also remind me of the man from Uncle. That is true, yeah. Oh my God, that is true. I am dressed like Henry Cavill's character from the man from Uncle. Nah, at least the remake version. I never seen the original one. Well, that's kind of cool. I did not realize that. Thank you so much, Susie. I may say that to other people. I'm like, oh no, I'm the man from Uncle. Dindin, am I wearing costume? I'm wearing a pure beatnik professor from Columbia University in the 1940s. Let's go through here. FM says, let's start saving from this house. Indeed. Happy Halloween, by the way, it says Greg. Thank you so much, Greg, for the Halloween wishes. I appreciate you. Where's the jumper from? If you can remember. Jake, I bought both of these pieces from Carl Gross, who has a store in Dublin, Ireland. As I mentioned, I bought a lot of clothes in Ireland. So much so that I had to buy another suitcase. And yeah, this is both from Dublin. Ania says, young Allen Ginsberg. I'm not dressed as specifically as Allen, but I would consider myself dressed as one of Allen's close friends. I would have to be a bit more scraggly bearded to be Allen Ginsberg. If everyone could let people know in the comments to press that live button. Some people are watching behind. Someone's dressed as Steve Zissou from the Wes Anderson film. Greg says stop and get a slice. Oh no, I can't eat right now. After that donut. Very filling. I knew they came from the Emerald Isle, says Susan. Indeed they did. Ania says his beard started small. Indeed it did, yeah. Allen Ginsberg's beard did start small, yeah. He started getting scraggly later in life. He had a huge, huge beard. Hey Joe, nice to see you here. Welcome. Just need a poetry book and red wine, tobacco pipe, and some jazzy records. Indeed, that's all I need. I got the poetry book in my backpack. Got a copy of Howl. Inkspire Life says, loved your story about your friend's girlfriend dressed up as you. Yes, do refer to that video from yesterday if you want to learn about that story. What's your favorite Halloween song? You know, I really love the band that Ryan Gosling started. It's not very popular, but it's called Dead Man's Bones. Check it out. It's actually one of the best Halloween albums in my opinion. Has kind of a little bit of an indie folk vibe to it, but it's definitely very creepy, very weird. (1977) along Bank Street. There was a bar here called the Ye Old Waverly Inn. The Ye Old Waverly Inn has been here for more than a century. The building here at Bank Street is dating back to 1844. It's one of those very, very old buildings of New York. You wouldn't smell the truffle mac and cheese like you do today. Back in 1977. Instead, you would have smelled smoldering brick, metal, stone, and wood as the entire building went up in flames. This was a huge fire that happened here at the Ye Old Waverly Inn, and the entire thing went up in flames. But weirdly enough, there was one room unscathed, room 16, which now is called the Edgar Allan Poe room. That was a bit weird. The fire, FDNY does an investigation, finds no reason why the building burned down. They couldn't find a leaky pipe. They couldn't find arson. They couldn't find a stove that was lit up too high. Nothing. They had no clue. But the people who worked at the Ye Old Waverly Inn had a feeling it might have been the spirits. The spirits not necessarily being the ones who people drink late at night. It's funny when people try to, they walk behind the camera, they get very awkward. So it's not the spirits that people were drinking, but many of the people who were working here, they were saying to the FDNY, like, hey, I think it might be the ghost. The FDNY was like, yeah, we can't blame the cause of the fire on a ghost. 1997, another fire breaks loose over here. And again, room 16 is unscathed. The FDNY, Fire Department of New York, in their investigation, interviews the hostess, Mary Ines. And she says, yeah, no wonder room 16 is unscathed. That's where the ghosts like to hang out. And she said that completely like if it was normal. The FDNY continued interviewing other people who worked at the restaurant, and they said the same thing. Like, yeah, the ghost hangs out there. Fires happen. It's a bit weird, I know, but we just live with it. Marioness in her interview said that various of the waitresses, as they were trying to lit up the fire, they were trying, but they couldn't because of a draft or something. It was too cold. And they would, go back in frustration, fixing other things, and then suddenly the fire would blaze. And again, the FDNY couldn't find any reason for the fire. And then in 2012, one more fire broke loose. This time, not much burned down, but one thing, a mural. For some reason, almost the entire building was unscathed, but the mural burned down, even though the rest of the room was fairly okay. And yet again, the people in the restaurant said it was the ghost. And yet again, the FDNY couldn't find any reason for it burning down. They had no clue. So what's happening here? Well, many of the artists have, many of the workers and also the patrons have reportedly seen a man dressed up in a very long jacket, looking like he came from the 1890s, like the Gilded Age era. So a very long jacket, usually with the top hat, smoking a cigar. He would usually hang out in room 16. That was the place he would be. Fires would start out of nowhere, and then some of the waitresses would claim that as they were tidying things up, the room would tidy itself. Which is weird. Why would a ghost tidy the room? Well, this confused everyone, but they just lived with it. No one really knows who this ghost was, but when paranormal investigators were hired, they found it rather weird because a lot of these instances are actually attributed to poltergeists. Poltergeists are more kind of manifestations of a being that's not quite a person, like not quite a demon, not quite a person, kind of more than that. And usually those are like electrical things, fires happen out of nowhere. So usually that's the thing for a poltergeist. But a lot of people claim that this was an actual ghost. So paranormal investigators also can't quite explain it. But nonetheless, this place since then has become the hottest restaurant in town. It be turned into just the Waverly Inn, and since then, no longer have spirits have been reported here, but celebrities. From the likes of Beyonce, Jay-Z, and many, many others have been spotted over here. Not in ghostly form, but in actually real life form. So who knows how these 3 random fires started that the FDNY have basically left unsolved at the ye old Waverly Inn. Now it's a lot easier to get into the restaurant because they just expanded with a huge outdoor space. So no longer is it super hard to get in. It used to be very difficult to get in. And this was the mural that actually ended up getting burned down. And Paul says, yes, it's a celebrity haunt. It is a celebrity haunt. It is. And right across the block, we have 11 Bank Street. Let's get closer. Let's wait for this car. The fires were caused by ghosts, and you know it, says Greg. Admit it, Greg. Greg is telling me, admit it. Timothy says it's haunted by celebrities. Now it is. Now it is. The likes of Beyonce and her fierceness comes and haunts everyone who passes by here to have an overpriced cocktail. Another thing that is quite scary about this place is how expensive it is for a truffle mac and cheese, spending upwards of $50. So 11 Bank Street. This one? No, this one. What's scarier than ghosts and ghouls in front of the house is scaffolding. But we're not going to talk about scaffolding today, even though it's scary. We're going to talk about a couple that moved in here back in the 1950s. 1951. A rather odd couple moved in here to 11 Bank Street. This building is covered in scaffolding. I've told this story the past 2 years. First time on Facebook, and last year was on YouTube as well. And it's still under scaffolding. They haven't fixed it yet. This house was built around the mid-1800s, and for quite a while it was a boarding house. And then by 1951, a rather odd couple bought this apartment building. And they were odd because it was Dr. Harvey Slayton, who was an astrophysicist that actually worked at the Manhattan Project. His mentor was Oppenheimer when he was in college. So yes, and this is all based on real stories, because New York Times did an article on this story in 1957. Stay tuned. The other one was Yeffe Kimball. Yeffe Kimball, her name was Goodman, Effie Goodman. She was most likely full Jewish American, but she was born in Oklahoma, and she assumed a Native American identity. She identified as being Osage Indian. So for the rest of her life, she ended up living as a Native American and became a Native American artist. So this couple, Bohemians, end up moving in together into this former boarding house and restructuring the entire place. So you can imagine there was scaffolding back then as well. 1957, the New York Times comes and investigates because they've heard of stories that have happened here. When they would have parties and entertain their guests, as true Bohemians would, their party guests would claim that they would see a ghost passing by. They would smell cheap perfume filling the air. They would also feel like someone's sitting on their lap. Usually the couple would just be like, don't worry. Back in the early 1950s, they told to the New York Times that they hired a carpenter by the name of Arthur Brodie, who was a British American, and he was working on the top floor. And as he was working, an object fell on his head, and he hit himself very bad. Looked at it. It was about twice the size of a coffee tin can. And he rushed downstairs, put the tin can down on the dining room table in front of the couple, Yeffe and Harvey Slayton, and said to them, I quit. I found the body. They look at the tin can, and it reads, the cremated remains of Elizabeth Bullock, who died in 1931 and was cremated in Middle Village, Queens. She died just a few blocks away at Perry Street. Apparently either being hit by a car or dying out of cardiac arrest, or maybe it was a combination of both. And for some reason, her cremated remains were in the top floor. As the repairs continued, late at night, when the entire upper floor was empty, they would hear footsteps back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. From 11 p.m. all the way to 4 a.m. all night. They would hear random knocking. I gotta knock a little bit better. There's nothing to knock on here, but random knocking. Bum, 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 bum. No sense. Completely irregular. Which led them to believe that it wasn't a pipe or some type of wood kind of cracking because of winter time. It wasn't none of those things, because if it were that, it would be a little bit more regular. You probably had leaky pipes before. You notice that they're pretty regular. No, this sounded like someone was trying to get their attention. So they were completely confused and had no idea what was happening. But during the parties, as they were being haunted, they would just say, "Oh, don't worry, it's Elizabeth." And they started getting close, especially Yeffe Kimball, the Jewish American woman who assumed the Native American identity, ended up becoming friends with good old Elizabeth. When Elizabeth would act up and the doors would start flinging open, she would just say, "Oh, Elizabeth, just grab yourself a drink." Even Harvey joined in. Now, Harvey was a strict atheist and scientist. He did not believe in the ghosts, but he just gave in. He's like, "I have no clue what's happening here, so just grab yourself a drink, Elizabeth." The hauntings got so frequent that they decided to contact the premier paranormal investigator by the name of Hans Holzer. Oh yeah, same guy, once again, strikes again. The original ghost hunter, Hans Holzer, who wrote many books like Yankee Ghosts. George says it's just rumors. So as I mentioned, this has been covered by the New York Times and has been covered by a few other publications. Also has been covered by Hans Holzer. And Hans Holzer was no crackpot. He actually was very diligent in capturing all the details and all the specifics of these stories, the real history behind the stories. So he wasn't some type of crackpot who just kind of made stuff up. He was known for his methodical record keeping, even though he hired, mediums and things like that. But he always kept them separate. He always said, like, this was from the medium and this is the real history. So yeah, these are real stories. They're not just legends that people say. So Hans Holzer comes over here and he hires a woman, a medium, by the name of Mrs. Myers. Mrs. Ethel Myers and Hans Holzer were already very famous for solving, or not solving, but for investigating a haunting out in Long Island that ended up becoming a very famous film called the Amityville Horror. That story is a lot more gruesome, a lot more weird, a lot more scary than I think anything I've told you today. So read at your own discretion afterwards. Mrs. Myers comes over here and she starts having the seance, communicating with this dead spirit. And she speaks usually in a very heavy German accent, but suddenly she started speaking in Irish brogue. And this Irish brogue, she mentioned that she couldn't move on for some reason. She couldn't move on because she wasn't properly buried. She wished she was properly buried underneath the real Catholic cross, but she wasn't. When Harvey heard this, something struck to him, because a gentleman came just a few weeks before the haunting started by the last name of Bullock, asking if this was still a boarding house and can go to the top floor. And of course he told them, like, no, it's completely closed. And the man just disappeared. So they go up, they investigate even more, and they find out that Elizabeth Bullock was disowned by her family because she married a Protestant man while she was Catholic. And her Irish Catholic family completely did not like this at all and completely disowned her. When she was going to be buried after her death, the family refused to give her a Catholic burial. The Catholic Church also refused to give her a Catholic burial, and she was cremated. Bullock, the Protestant husband, apparently hid those cremated remains up there in the boarding house, maybe due to the family trouble, and kind of scrambled around and just left it there. Since then, Elizabeth couldn't move on until she would be buried like a proper Catholic woman under a proper Celtic cross. Hans Holzer recommended to Yeffe and to Sladen to bury Elizabeth in the backyard and use a real Catholic cross. see if you can find a Catholic priest. But Yefei said no. This was in 1963. Yefei did not want to let Elizabeth go. She wanted to continue her friendship with her. So she kept the cremated remains on their dining room table, kept her during parties, talking about the entire story, and she liked her having her around the house. The hauntings continued, of course. Random cabinets were open and shut. But overall, they've said that the hauntings were rather friendly. They never felt under threat. They felt like they were connected with Elizabeth. And Yefei just wanted to keep her around. Yefei died in 1978. And Harvey ended up remarrying to Anne Sladen. And in 1980, a Washington Post writer comes over here. Her name is Joyce Wadler, and investigates what happened here. And she gets wind of the story. So let me show you their photos. This is Harvey Sladen, the astrophysicist who worked for the Manhattan Project, literally. No exaggeration, this is all a true story. Of course, whatever happened to them is their own personal experience, so we don't know for sure. So Yefei Kimball painted things that were usually associated with spiritualism, right over here. Let me see, do I have Yefei Kimball here? So here's the original New York Times article from 1957. And I have the original Washington Post article that you can still read online, both of these articles, published in 1980. So real stories, real history. Of course, we don't know the personal experiences of these people, but two people, the couple, and then later on, Anne Sladen, three people, all reported the same thing. So this story goes out, becomes popular once again, and they try, Anne Sladen this time around really wants Elizabeth to move on. She is also friends with her, the new wife of Harvey Sladen, and here is the tin canister that's on the table. The writer found it weird that they placed this tin canister with the cremated remains of this ghost right next to the brie and the red wine. But that's Greenwich Village. A lot of interesting, quirky characters live here. They contacted a few Catholic churches in the nearby area. No. None of them wanted to bury her because she married a Protestant man. Finally, they receive a letter in the mail from a man named Father Deravu, a little bit hard to pronounce, all the way from Humboldt, California, Humboldt County, California. He's a Catholic priest, and he says, send her over here, we'll give her a proper Catholic burial. And that's what they did. They send her over. A few people showed up to the proceedings. This is a photo I found in a blog. Very interesting blog, check it out. And she was buried. After that, Anne and Harvey heard and saw nothing else. The hauntings stopped. Harvey ended up living until very old. He was, I think, in his late 80s. In 2013, he passed away. Here's a photo of him, taken by his son, who's a photographer and blogger. And till his very last day, Harvey was still a scientist, still an atheist. He still swore that he did not believe in anything supernatural. He always believed that something could be explained by science, and he did not believe in ghosts. But he still said to people who interviewed him, he still couldn't explain what happened in 11 Bank Street. Something there he was never able to explain in any scientific way. That is the couple that befriended a ghost. I hope everyone enjoyed these stories. Thank you so much for tuning in to these videos. I'll show you one more time. That's the end of this Halloween tour. Show you one more time 11 Bank Street. Let's walk a little bit in front of the ye old Waverly Inn. A lot of great decorations all around here. Julio says you're an amazing storyteller. Susie as well. Thank you so much. Kay says great stories. Susie says you do realize we're all having a sleepover at your place tonight. More ghost stories at a midnight feast. How does that sound? I hope later I will turn into a happy ghost. No scaring for me. So this is still under construction. I feel bad for whoever lives here. Covered in scaffolding for like 2 years. Hopefully they remove the scaffolding. And let me show you a little bit of view Waverly, and I'll just pass right in front. So right over here. So hard to see inside. There we go. I can go to sleep happy, says Gabriela. Oh, I'm so glad, Gabriela. Is it trash day, Tom? Every day is trash day here in New York City. Literally, I mean, there's trash here every single day. Yogi Bear, thank you so much for a $5 super chat. I appreciate you, Yogi Bear. You kept me on the edge of my seat. Thank you so much, Inspire Life. My pleasure, Inspire Life. Thank you so much. Dutch Moss, thank you so much for tuning in. Liberty Christ, thank you so much. Don't think I even blinked while listening to these stories, says Catherine. Oh, I'm so glad you enjoyed them. Thank you so much for tuning in. You look familiar to me. Did you come directly from the Travel Channel, says Miss. No, I've never been on mainstream television yet. Hopefully see you all later. Yes. So stay tuned around 7 p.m.-ish. New York City time. I will be showing you the parade, permitting that there's cell phone reception. I already have a press pass to go inside. Thing is, I can't give any promises because, unfortunately, there's 2 million spectators that go to the parade. So when I've tried to do live streams before, there was very little cell phone reception. But I'm crossing fingers that we don't have that huge audience tune out today, and there might be some cell phone reception. So crossing fingers, I'll see you then. Thank you everyone so much for tuning in. We have people dressed up as Squid Game over here. Just the crowd over here in front of us. Kids are already trick-or-treating. People with chats. That's so cool. Great vibes here. I'll see you around 7 p.m.-ish, 7 to 8 p.m.-ish. Thank you so much everyone for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed the broadcast. If you want to lend your support and see bonus videos of Ireland, Italy, Greece, Mexico, and also New York City, go to patreon.com/urbanist. If you want to receive a postcard from New York City this month, become a mega urbanist. Or if you want to leave an individual contribution, paypal.me/Ariel Vieira allows me to tell these stories despite running into music and other challenges with copyright when walking around. Everyone, keep being awesome and always keep on exploring. Have a great day, everyone. Have a spooky day. Bye-bye.